The Da Vinci Code, an explosive murder mystery that claims to reveal the 2,000-year-old secret of the Holy Grail. Its release caused worldwide controversy.
We were all personally denounced by the Pope.
But how much of the blockbuster film is really true?
Dan Brown may have hit on something in his fiction that could be true.
Did Leonardo da Vinci leave messages in his work 500 years ago?
If you want to find a real secret in the Last Supper, you don't have to look what is inside.
We reveal the inspiration for the on-screen character of symbologist Robert Langdon.
When people started asking me, is Robert Langdon like you? I started thinking, yeah, now that you've mentioned it.
And the real mystery behind the church the Da Vinci Code made famous.
There are voids within each of these pinnacle constructions.
Real-life codebreakers uncover the extraordinary real story behind the Da Vinci Code. May 2006, the Da Vinci Code hits the big screen. Based on the book of the same name by Dan Brown and directed by Ron Howard, the film causes worldwide controversy.
We were all personally denounced by the Pope. We didn't get great sacks of hate mail, just the occasional.
The film's headline-grabbing claim that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and had children is presented as fact, and infuriates the Catholic Church.
Truth is pretty flexible when dealing with events that supposedly occurred thousands of years ago.
The Da Vinci Code is the most eagerly anticipated release of the year and rakes in $750 million at the box office.
Well, I think that the controversy that existed prior to the film opening only, helped create more of that sort of want-to-see attitude among the potential audience.
But how much of the film is really based on fact? Using one of Leonardo da Vinci's most well-known artworks, The Last Supper, one of the key characters in the film, Sir Lee Teabing, played by Sir Ian McKellen, claims the Catholic Church is behind a 2,000-year-old conspiracy.
How many wine glasses are there on the table?
One. The Holy Grail.
Open your eyes.
According to the film, the Holy Grail isn't a cup as many believe. It's a person. And no ordinary person, but the woman who for centuries the Catholic Church branded a prostitute, Mary Magdalene. But what really incensed the Church is the film's assertion that Mary Magdalene and Jesus were man and wife.
Suddenly, the image of Jesus which the churches have cultivated, and around which and upon which they've built huge amounts of Western theology, begins to dissolve.
The question of whether or not Jesus was ever married has been argued over for nearly 2,000 years. But the film's critics were quick to point out that the scriptures make no reference to it at all.
There is complete silence on this in the Bible. It is not mentioned. That's quite interesting in itself.
In the film, Sir Lee Teabing produces evidence to support his astonishing claim, the little-known Gospel of Philip.
Christ loved her more than all the disciples and used to kiss her.
But this says nothing of marriage.
The Gospel of Philip does, in fact, exist. It was discovered along with 12 other papyrus books by a farmer in Western Egypt in December 1945. Scholars believe these books, now stored in Cairo's Coptic Museum, are translations of Gospels written by Jesus' disciples. Elaine Pagels, a professor of religion at Princeton University, claims these Gospels give a very different picture of his relationship with Mary Magdalene.
There are different stories in the New Testament Gospels about Mary Magdalene, but the most powerful and persistent is that she's associated with prostitution, which completely discredit her qualifications as being anyone important in the Jesus circle. Now, when you look in the Gospel of Thomas, for example, she is a disciple. She's an important disciple.
But does the Gospel of Philip really prove Mary Magdalene was more than just Jesus' disciple, as claimed in the film?
Dan Brown began, he says, by when he saw a line from the Gospel of Philip that said, Jesus loved Mary Magdalene more than all the disciples and kissed her often on her, and then the text is broken.
The missing word has never been found, but the Coptic word for mouth fits the missing space, so some experts have assumed that's the full translation. Reverend Jones believes that even if the missing word is mouth, that's still not proof that Mary was Jesus' wife.
Kissing on the mouth is what family members did to each other. A family kiss would be on the mouth. It is not erotic in our sense. To us, a kiss on the mouth is pretty well exclusively erotic, except perhaps mother and tiny, tiny child. It was not so in the ancient world. So one shouldn't immediately assume, kissed on the mouth, there must be some sexual frisson here.
Elaine Pagels believes that's exactly what Dan Brown did assume for the Da Vinci Code.
There's another way to interpret these sources, and that's the way Dan Brown didn't interpret them. In the Gospel of Philip, when it says he and Mary were constant companions and he kissed her often on her mouth and he regarded her as his bride, it's speaking metaphorically.
Many scholars have long argued that the Jesus and Mary relationship in the Gospel of Philip is not a literal physical connection, merely a spiritual one. But a startling new discovery has blown the debate wide open. This small scrap of papyrus, owned by an anonymous private collector, is forcing some experts to reconsider their interpretations. Believed to be a fragment of another long-lost gospel, it was sent to Harvard University in 2010 for analysis and translation. It contains just 33 words, and the line that's causing so much excitement reads, Jesus said to them, my wife.
Dan Brown may have hit on something in his fiction that could be true.
If the fragment is proved to be real, it suggests that some early Christians believed Jesus was married.
The authenticity of the Jesus Codex seems quite clear because it's very hard to fake a 2nd century Coptic script that's faded the way this text is. I think the evidence is very good that this is an ancient text.
But the Gospel of Jesus' wife does not prove that Dan Brown was right. It proves nothing about Jesus' actual life, only that some early Christians, writing long after he died, may have believed he had a wife. But Dan Brown goes even further, claiming that 550 years ago, Leonardo da Vinci knew this secret and encrypted one of his most famous paintings with a message revealing all. Could that be true? The Last Supper, one of Leonardo da Vinci's most famous works, plays a key role in Ron Howard's 2006 blockbuster, The Da Vinci Code. The film claims the figure sitting to Jesus' right is Mary Magdalene, not the disciple John, as the church would have us believe. And that she is the Holy Grail.
When I saw the movie of Dan Brown and I read the book, I was very happy because it was a very beautiful novel, but it's science fiction.
Mario Tadai is a Milan-based inventor and an expert on the works of Leonardo da Vinci. He spent 15 years analyzing the Renaissance master's work, trying to get inside his mind. Mario doesn't believe the film's claims, and for good reason. He knows Da Vinci's version of the Last Supper was just that, a version.
Before Leonardo da Vinci, there are hundreds of Last Suppers. And when he painted the Last Suppers, he had to follow some rules. These rules wants to have the people in that position with that smile, so people can recognize the different apostles one by one.
Before Leonardo, all copies of the Last Supper looked very similar. Artists used the same formula to depict Christ's disciples. St. Peter handles a knife. Judas carries a purse of silver, and St. John, the youngest disciple, is always shown as a youthful, feminine-looking figure.
Is this John or Maria Magdalene? Is a very easy question, but it's a stupid question, because it must be John, because Leonardo had to copy the Last Supper before him, and John looks like a woman. That's it.
Cecilia Frossinini is director of the mural painting laboratory at the Public Art Institute in Florence, Italy. Her team has restored works by many of the Italian masters, including 7 by Leonardo. She believes it's possible to see almost anything in the Last Supper, even the basis for a blockbuster film. Because the way it looks today is very different to how the painting started out.
We know that Leonardo used a very experimental technique because of the great deal of scientific investigation that were made on the Last Supper.
To create the Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci used an unusual method. Instead of painting onto wet plaster, he used a mixture of egg yolks, vinegar, and oil paint applied directly onto the wall of a Milanese church. It was an unsuccessful experiment. The materials he used weren't up to the job and began to flake away from the wall as soon as the painting was completed.
So the problem is that today we are looking at the shadow of the original painting of Leonardo that was gone forever because of destroying and because of the repainting.
The film asks us to believe that the Last Supper contains letters hidden in plain sight. An M referring to Mary Magdalene, and a V, the symbol of a chalice, typically known as the Holy Grail, or as the Da Vinci Code would have us believe, a V, for the shape of a womb. According to the experts, if you look hard enough, all paintings contain shapes that look like letters. So, unless new evidence emerges that confirms whether or not the Last Supper does contain the letters M and V, the debate will never be resolved. Leonardo da Vinci may not be revealing the truth about Mary Magdalene and Jesus' relationship in his painting. But he is sending a message. One that 5 centuries ago was just as controversial as the Da Vinci Code.
What is missing from the picture is the halos.
Before Leonardo da Vinci, other versions of the Last Supper depicted Jesus and his disciples as saints, each with a halo. But da Vinci ignored this convention and angered the church by painting them without halos.
I believe that Leonardo never put the halos because he think that people are common people, and this is the true secret of Leonardo.
Leonardo da Vinci is communicating a subtle message with his Last Supper. He's telling us that Jesus was a mortal, a man, a theme echoed in the Da Vinci Code. But could he have left other clues for us to decipher? In the Da Vinci Code, Oscar-winning actor Tom Hanks plays Harvard professor of religious symbology Robert Langdon, who's drawn into the hunt for the Holy Grail. Remarkably, his character is based on a real-life expert in symbols, John Langdon, a graphic designer from Pennsylvania.
When people started asking me, is Robert Langdon like you? At first I would say no, not very much. And then after people started asking me more frequently, I started thinking, yeah, now that you've mentioned it.
In the Da Vinci Code, Robert Langdon is an expert at deciphering the meaning behind symbols. The real Langdon specializes in creating them.
The thing that I like the best about Robert Langdon is his interest in symbols. That's my life, that's his life, that's where we really overlap a great deal.
John's passion is designing ambigrams, a word or phrase that's symmetrical, so it reads the same upside down or back to front. And it was this speciality that first brought him into contact with Da Vinci Code author Dan Brown, long before he first put pen to paper.
Not many people know about Dan's music career. He was a pop music singer-songwriter, and Dick Brown called me one day and said that his son was about to start work on a new CD that was going to be called Angels and Demons, and would I be interested or willing to design an ambigram for the CD cover. After that CD, Dan decided he was no longer interested in the music business, and so he became a novelist at that point.
5 years later, Dan Brown wrote his first Robert Langdon novel, also called Angels and Demons, and used John's illustrations in the book. Brown's next Langdon novel was the Da Vinci Code, and when it became a film, John was contacted again.
This is the logo that I designed for the Depository Bank of Zurich that was used in the film with Tom Hanks and Audrey Tautou. The Depository Bank logo was visible for maybe 2 or 3 seconds in the film, and it was a nice, very brief view of it.
Like John, the film's leading man specializes in symbols, and they have the same last name. In the film, John's namesake gets caught up in a life or death race through some of Europe's most famous medieval locations to discover the final resting place of the Holy Grail. The symbologist has to decipher a series of cryptic clues, supposedly created by Leonardo da Vinci.
We need a mirror. Backwards, in the style of Leonardo himself. Thank you.
Almost everything Leonardo da Vinci wrote in his journals is back to front, and the letters inverted. He didn't create ambigrams like John Langdon. Instead, da Vinci used what's called mirror writing. So was this, as the film claims, a deliberate form of code?
I think the more likely reality was that he discovered that that was something he did with ease.
Professor Marianne Wolf is a reading and language specialist at Tufts University in Boston, Massachusetts. She doesn't believe Da Vinci, being left-handed, is the only reason he mirror wrote.
The journals, voluminous that they are, contain so many spelling errors, omissions, deletions, and grammatical errors. You see in computation him making some of the simplest retrieval errors.
Leonardo is often regarded as a genius, an accomplished designer and inventor, but it turns out spelling wasn't one of his gifts. To neurologists and language experts like Professor Wolf, Da Vinci's left-handedness and his poor spelling are signs his brain worked differently to most people's.
As a researcher, over 2 decades, working with hundreds of children and adults with dyslexia, I'm convinced that Leonardo da Vinci was dyslexic.
Dyslexia is an inherited learning disability which impairs people's reading and writing skills. Its cause or causes are not fully understood, but the condition affecting between 5 and 10% of people is brain-based. The human brain is made up of two hemispheres, the right and the left. Each is a highly specialized region that controls different functions. The left hemisphere governs our ability to recognize sequences of words and letters. That's why 95% of right-handed people use this hemisphere to communicate. The right hemisphere is used to analyze space and geometrical shapes and forms. But some left-handed people and dyslexics also use this hemisphere to communicate, which could explain why Da Vinci was so brilliant at creating geometric shapes, but struggled with spelling. Professor Wolff believes Leonardo da Vinci mirror wrote because his brain was wired to do so. And she's keen to test her theory.
Because mirror writing is one of the things that people speculate about, we wanted to see, well, is it easier for dyslexics? Is it easier for left-handed? And can we, in this very rude approximation of those four categories, can we make some kinds of interesting observations?
She's going to conduct a simple experiment with 4 people. There are 2 left-handers, including John Langdon, and 2 right-handers. In each category, one of them is dyslexic. They're being asked to transcribe mirror-written sentences. By timing the volunteers, Professor Wolff will see who's fastest and, in theory, who's better mapped neurologically to mirror write. Left-handers, like John Langdon, should be able to read the sentences without difficulty, but the right-handers should struggle.
What are the times?
In both tasks, the dyslexics are quicker than the others, and the left-handers are faster than the right-handers.
Mine is 57 seconds.
And mine was 1 minute, 30 seconds.
The sample size is too small to confirm Marianne's theory, but it does indicate that left-handed dyslexics are more naturally able to mirror write. It also suggests that Da Vinci, the most prolific mirror writer in history, might have been dyslexic, and that his mirror writing was the result of a natural neurological process which has nothing to do with codes at all. Whether or not Da Vinci was dyslexic can never be proved, but there's no doubt he was one of the world's most creative and productive designers. So did he, as the film claims, really create the ultimate safe box to protect secrets? In the Da Vinci Code, the climax of the film depends on Tom Hanks's character opening a strange device.
A cryptex. They are used to keep secrets. It's Da Vinci's design.
Inside is the secret location of the Holy Grail. Only the right code will open the cryptex. If it's forced or broken, the secret will be destroyed forever.
The cryptex of the Dan Brown movie looks like Da Vinci inventions because it's very fascinating. In the movie they say that this is a safe box, you can open it and find some secrets inside. I was very fascinated with these tools because it's fascinating, it's a nice tool. And I tried to find it in the Da Vinci Code, real codes.
This is a copy of one of Da Vinci's notebooks. It's called Folio B. On page 33, there's a series of schematics that some claim are blueprints of the cryptex that's featured in the film.
If you focus on this picture, you can see something like a ring with mechanism around that looks like exactly the cryptex.
Mario Tadai makes his living creating the inventions designed by Leonardo. For the past year, he's been building the design thought to be Da Vinci's cryptex, with surprising results.
So the real project of Leonardo, in the page where they see the cryptex that is not true, is this machine, this 2 meters weight and 2.5 meters height.
Rather than being a coded safe, as in the film, in reality, Da Vinci's design is for a machine that harnesses gravity. It's one of the earliest known attempts to create perpetual motion, a mechanism that once started will never stop.
Leonardo da Vinci was obsessed by these machines, these perpetual motion machines. He designed hundreds of different machines like this. But Leonardo knows very well that this machine cannot work because of the friction.
So Da Vinci's design on page 33 of his Folio B notebook isn't the cryptex used in the film. In fact, the cryptex is a clever figment of author Dan Brown's imagination, visualized on screen by the film's art department. In the film, clues to the location of this clever device are hidden in the Louvre in Paris. But filming night scenes in the famous gallery was never going to be easy.
Suddenly the idea of bringing lighting into the Louvre made them very, very uneasy. So what we wound up doing was building huge portions of the Louvre on stage, on the James Bond stage, actually, at Pinewood. And we then had to recreate all those paintings in phenomenal detail.
They're key scenes in the film because it's here that Robert Langdon learns that the curator of the Louvre, Jacques Saunière, played by Jean-Pierre Mariel, heads a shadowy organization called the Priory of Zion. In the Da Vinci Code, the Priory of Zion is a secret society that protects the bloodline of Jesus and Mary. It's pure fiction, but in creating it, Dan Brown touched on a real story, one that any Hollywood scriptwriter would be proud of. In 1891, a priest named Berenier Sunier was renovating a church in a small village in southwest France, when he discovered some ancient parchments.
These parchments are encoded, and they indicate the existence of a colossal treasure in the vicinity. That's according to the legend.
The documents are written in Latin, and at the bottom of one of the pages appear two initials, a P and an S. But despite this tantalizing clue, no treasure was ever found. Then, almost 90 years later, in the late 1970s, authors researching the story discovered a secret dossier that revealed what those initials meant. They stood for the Priory of Zion, an organization created in 1099 to protect a secret bloodline of the French royal family. The dossier traced the royal bloodline all the way to the modern era, to reveal a man named Pierre Plantard, living in southeast France. The story was a national sensation, especially when it emerged that this so-called French royal was a middle-aged caretaker. But then it took an astonishing twist when the authors of a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail published their theory. That this long-lost French king was also the last living descendant of Jesus.
Là, on fait du sensationnel. Et à bon marché.
This is a sensation. They tell us that Jesus got married to Mary Magdalene and they had children. And that gave rise to a dynasty. Not just any dynasty, but the Merovingians, the last of which is Pierre Plantard. So, he's a descendant of Jesus.
The book's claim in 1982 was too much for Plantard. He admitted that the secret dossier and the Priory of Zion were fabricated. In the 1960s, together with two friends, Plantard manufactured his claim to the French throne by creating the secret dossier. He He named the organization after a mountain near his hometown. The hoax was set in motion by planting the documents into French archives. But the publication of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail book blew the whole thing way out of proportion. Claiming to be a descendant of Jesus was too much, even for a master hoaxer like Plantaarde. The plot of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code was written 20 years after the publication of Holy Blood, Holy Grail. But his portrayal of the Priory of Zion and the idea that Jesus' living descendant exists is identical. In the film, the last surviving blood relative of Jesus is discovered not in France, but in Scotland.
Rosslyn Chapel.
So this is it. The gift at the end.
The Holy Grail, 'neath ancient Rosslyn, waits.
Just a few miles south of Edinburgh, Rosslyn Chapel is one of the most ornately carved medieval buildings in all of Europe. It's the location for the film's climactic scene, but filming it presented a challenge.
When we arrived at Rosslyn Chapel the first time, it had a massive corrugated roof over the entire structure because over the many years it had begun leaking so badly that they had initially put up what they were considering a temporary roof to protect the chapel. But this was due to lack of funds. This temporary roof had been up there for, good Lord, I don't know, 20 years at least.
Bringing a major Hollywood production to Rosslyn had a huge impact on the chapel.
But after we made the film, the attendance at Rosslyn Chapel grew so exponentially that they were actually able to take off the corrugated metal roof and install a proper roof and do a complete restoration of Rosslyn. And I don't know, that was sort of something to feel really good about, you know? It's a real sort of plus side to this whole thing.
The film claims Rosslyn was built by the Knights Templar, a Christian military order who, according to legend, discovered the secret of the Holy Grail in the 11th century. At first glance, the chapel's intricate stonework seems to confirm the connection with the Templars.
You know, one of the main attractions of Rosslyn Chapel is that it's absolutely stacked with carved detail. I mean, it's charged. Every surface is featuring exquisite three-dimensional carved detail. For example, the two figures on horseback, you know, that's got real significance in terms of Knights Templar.
The truth is the chapel was built 200 years after the Knights Templar were disbanded. Nevertheless, its carvings have attracted Grail hunters. Rosslyn Chapel's stone roses, which some say symbolize Mary Magdalene, have led people to believe it must be the hiding place of the Grail. So was the Da Vinci Code right all along? Is Rosslyn Chapel really hiding a secret? The climactic scene of the 2006 blockbuster The Da Vinci Code reveals that Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel contains a hidden chamber, the tomb of Mary Magdalene. For centuries, the chapel has been a target for real-life Grail hunters. So could the film be right? Does Rosslyn really have secret voids hidden within its walls? Nick Boys is in charge of restoration of the chapel's stonework.
The carved detail of Rosslyn Chapel is absolutely lyrical, and the more you look, the more you see. So, for example, we can see a flower carved into the side elevation of this pinnacle. And if you look very carefully, there's a hole right in the center of that flower.
Each of Rosslyn's 20 pinnacles conceals a hidden chamber. They're a design feature of the building, created for a specific purpose, but not a religious one.
So when we opened this void, we found it jammed absolutely full of aged honeycombs, which clearly suggests that it had been used as a colony for bees. The poetry of this building is that that flower and that access hole was the route that the bees were designed to take in order to access the void.
But the purpose of some of Roslin's other carvings has proved harder to solve. In particular, this sequence of 215 carved boxes on the ribs of the arches.
This is the most famous part of Roslin Chapel, simply because it's the most intricately carved and holds the most amazing mystery of all.
Stuart Mitchell is a composer. He thinks these carved boxes are a code, concealing a secret that's very different than anything posed in the Da Vinci Code. Stuart Mitchell thinks that this sequence of 215 stone blocks on the ceiling of Roslin Chapel contains a coded message, built into the fabric of the building 500 years ago. And for him, the key to understanding the mystery are the carved musicians found at the top of each of the chapel's pillars.
There's 13 of them, and they're all brilliantly carved. Lute players, cornet players, bagpipes, a real variety of an orchestra, and everybody is playing in performance position.
Stuart's convinced that Roslin's code is a musical one. But the trick was identifying what the symbols on the boxes meant.
The eureka moment came when we'd finally watched some videos on cymatics and watched a run-through of 2 octaves and saw the patterns of Roslin appearing one after another, after another, after another.
The markings on Roslin's boxes appear to be what's called cymatics. Cymatics is the study of visible sound. John Reed is recognized as being one of the world's foremost researchers in the field.
Sound lies at the very heart of all matter. Everything in the universe vibrates. So if we can actually make that visible, we can understand the universe in a way that we could never have understood it before.
Although sound is invisible to the eye, when applied to a metal plate or a thin membrane covered in a fine dust, pitch and vibration create a pattern unique to that frequency and note.
If we then use special techniques, such as the medieval technique of literally sprinkling on sand, then we will reveal the imprint that the sound has made.
Roslin's boxes are a musical score, carved in stone cymatic patterns. And by using an internet database, Stuart Mitchell identified the notes depicted on the boxes.
This first pattern here, that looks like a Maltese cross a little bit, is produced by a C natural note, and that's this note. The next note here is a A note. And pushing it along here, we have a B note. This is what a pattern produced by a B natural.
To check the accuracy of Stuart's research, John Reed will reverse engineer the cymatic patterns and compare his findings against Stuart's.
The process of identifying the Roslin patterns is essentially trial and error to begin with. You know, we're using an electromechanical plate that we're driving to create the patterns. So to find the pattern, it's literally necessary to sweep through all the different natural frequencies of the plate and see which patterns pop out.
One by one, John identifies the note, pitch and frequency of the first 3 cymatic patterns marked on Roslin's boxes. Playing them together, John's notes match Stuart's. Tests have shown that Stuart's cymatic theory works. But what does the music sound like?
were a bit afraid it's either going to sound totally right or it's going to sound totally wrong. But we were really surprised to find it had such a charm and musical structure about it, and musical direction. To our ears, it was an intended piece of music.
But Roslin's head of restoration, Nick Boys, isn't convinced.
Well, my problem with using these carved images, the boxes on the ends of the cusps here, as some code to decipher a hidden message, is some of these cusps were knocked off as part of the repair works and replaced.
Roslin's leaking roof has always been a problem for the chapel. Over centuries, water leaking into the building has eroded the soft sandstone, destroying details on some of the carved boxes. In the 19th century, the decision was taken to replace the worst affected masonry. And today, it's possible to spot which of the chapel's boxes are original and which aren't.
We can look at the lowest cusp, and it looks very sharp. It's not aged. It has all the appearance of a three-dimensional form that was modelled not so long ago. However, if you were to look up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you are certainly looking at aged carved detail.
Today, Roslin's boxes are a mix of original 15th century blocks and 19th century replacements.
Whoever modelled these cusps may not have taken great care, or in fact may not have had the original information in order to make an exact replica of the original cusp.
Question marks over the accuracy of Roslin's restored boxes means no one can be certain that the music Stuart has deciphered is what was encoded into the chapel 500 years ago. In reality, unlike in the film, Roslin's secrets can never be proved. As entertainment, the Da Vinci Code was a phenomenal success. As history, it's little more than a series of conspiracy theories, all unproven and most implausible. And while the discovery of the Gospel of Jesus' wife has brought new attention to Dan Brown's provocative theme of a married Jesus and Mary, it does not prove his case. Because it too could be a work of fiction, written by an ancient Dan Brown who knew that truth often gets in the way of a good story.